Hi everybody, I'm Jenny. Welcome to our 4 o'clock live. I am here with Devon Wayt. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you, Jenny.
Thank you so much for being here. So you guys, this is a really special day. He is celebrating 20 years of sobriety.
That's right.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
20 years.
20 years.
I was telling him I don't know how, because you look like you're like 30, so but 20 years, you guys, it's like, for me, 20 years seems so far in the distance, right? And for you, when you got sober, you were how old?
I was 22.
You were 22. So when you were 22 and got sober, what was that like for you? Like, could you look into the future at all? Like, what was it like?
Well, I tried to get sober when I was 19.
Okay.
So getting it at 22 was, it needed to happen.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad I did. I had learned a lot of what not to do. So I did the opposite in spite of what my head told me. And it took a lot of help, really a lot of white knuckling, but I got to it. Yeah.
Wow. So we were chatting a little bit before. So so you were born and raised in Colorado.
Yes.
In a little town.
Little town.
Of 400 people.
Yes.
Right? Okay, you guys. So 400 people, but drugs and alcohol are everywhere.
Yes.
Like you think, oh, I'm going to move here or do this, but really, you know, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And so how did it start for you? Was it alcohol? Was it drugs? How did that begin?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of both. Just with friends and, you know, hanging out with the wrong crowd, essentially. And you know, it didn't really get bad until 17, because I tried drugs at a fairly young age. And at 17, my family wouldn't allow me to use drugs inside of the house or alcohol, rightfully so. I'd feel the same way. But so I just left. And I moved in with a friend and tried to make it 17 years old. I'm lucky I made it through high school. I did. And but I would not recommend that to anybody. You know? Yeah. So things got bad pretty quick because I didn't have that support system around me.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So when did you realize that you had a problem? Was it your family that got you to treatment, or how did that work?
Yeah, so I ended up moving to Phoenix, Arizona. I tried to go to graphic design school. Okay. But the problem is when I was on drugs, I just wouldn't go to school. And if you don't go to school, you can't graduate school. Right. So I was put on probation, and my family had supported me in moving to Phoenix, but I, again, connected with the wrong crowd. I wasn't in the right frame of mind, and they eventually came and did an intervention with my friends there. And I went to treatment in Tucson, at Cottonwood Day, Tucson. Okay. At that time. And then they referred me, I did 28 days there. This was before insurance would cover treatment or anything like that. And then I had a choice, because I wanted to go to school. And they said, here's two options. One was at the University of Texas, Austin, I believe. They had a collegiate recovery community. And then the other one was Sober Living by the Sea in Newport Beach. And there was a program there called the TEACH program, where you could go to school and stay in treatment at the same time. And I come from a long line of teachers. So I was like, I've got to get through school. So looking at the brochures, I saw the islands and the beach and the palm trees. I was like, let's go there. So, and that's how I wound up here. Thank God you had that support. Yeah. You know, unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that support. Right. How did your family know how to navigate through that? I mean, this was a long time ago. It was 20 years ago. Yeah. They found an interventionist, and I couldn't even remember his name. I know a ton of interventionists today, but a man with white hair and a white beard, and he didn't say much. I think he just coached them. Yeah. But they said what they needed to say, and I went to treatment. So amazing. Yeah. So when you were 22 and you decided you were going to stay sober, how did you stay sober? What did that look like for you at that age? Yeah. So, well, I did what I knew not to do. Okay. And what I did wrong, or technically, you know, just what I shouldn't have done, is I got into a relationship at the treatment center when I was 19. I was just looking to fill that void, and my self-confidence was like, you know, on the ground. Couldn't look anybody in the eye, anything like that. And so when the relationship didn't work and I went to treatment, I knew I just needed to focus on myself. And that treatment center that I went to was out in Riverside, was all male treatment. And so that was good for me, you know, at the time. And I just hung around. They kept telling me, because I did 30 days and then another 30 days, and I couldn't stay there anymore, so I found some local housing. But the gentleman who ran the treatment center said, just come back and volunteer, and you know, we'll keep you busy. And so I had a list of chores. I'd clean the litter box and water the roses, and I'd just take care of these chores all day. But it kept me around recovery. I kept reading, you know, my recovery books and going to meetings, and that's what worked. You know. Yeah.
So you got your confidence back eventually.
Yes, absolutely.
What did that feel like as a man, getting that confidence back?
You know, it felt really good. I remember there was a gentleman that told me, "You finally looked me in the eye." And I don't think I even knew how bad my confidence was. And I don't know where that came from. Maybe my family, maybe myself. You know, it's a lot of that self-imposed trauma that we do. I got myself into some really bad situations, carried a lot of guilt. But, you know, trusting in a higher power and the recovery process, was able to let a lot of that go, and then start to interact with people, look them in the eye, and start helping people, because you couldn't help anybody if I wasn't, you know, helping myself.
Right, exactly. So you eventually got into another relationship, right? And what was that like, having a relationship in recovery in your early 20s?
Yeah, so I knew I couldn't be in a relationship for the first year. I committed to that. So I think it was...
Hold on, let's say that again, because it's so important. And a lot of times, bless their hearts, I was the same way. It's like, oh no, I'm good, I can do this, I can have the relationship, right? And that is just a constant thing we hear in treatment, in the rooms, in the AA rooms, where people are constantly relapsing because of relationships.
Yeah.
And so, honestly, you guys, take that suggestion. It is so valuable to wait. I don't even think I knew what I was doing at all for a good year to 2 years. Like, it was, I had so much self-discovery to do and work on myself that I didn't have anything to offer anybody else. So really, you guys, if you can take that year, take that year. I think that's so valuable. Okay.
Yeah. So I listened, because they had told me that the first time, and I was like, "Oh no, I got this," you know.
Right.
So that time, and it was bad. So I listened, I did it, and same like you said, I didn't have anything to give to anybody. So I just needed to work on myself, and you know, figure out what my purpose is, figure out, you know, what makes me tick, figure out how I can help others, and. It's truly a blessing to be in recovery, because we get to do those things. You know, we get to stay in contact with, you know, our higher power, higher selves. We get to, you know, show up and meditate and do all these things. And normal people, they can choose to do those, you know, but I had to do them in order to stay sober. So anyways, that first year was figuring out what it was like for me and who I was and all that. And then I did have something to give to somebody. So, yeah, so I met my wife today. It was, I think I had, it was about a little, close to 2 years, year and a half sober, when I asked my sponsor, hey, like, can I take her on a date?
You hear that too, you guys? He asked his sponsor.
That's right. Yeah, he gave me a blessing, and yeah, we went to a scary movie right out in Riverside. I remember it like it was yesterday. And that was our first date, and then I asked her to marry me. We got married when I had 2.5 years sober, which I think was pretty quick, but I was ready to get going with life, you know. So
that's amazing, and you've been together ever since.
Yes.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah.
Is she in recovery as well?
No, she's not.
So what was that like?
Yeah, so the girl I was dating was in recovery, and so it's not like I was looking for somebody that wasn't in recovery. Clarabelle, my lovely wife, just came into my life, and you know, she's the type of person that if she drinks a little alcohol, she doesn't really like the way it makes her feel, and so she's completely opposite of me. But yeah, right. I have no idea what that looks like.
I know, me neither.
Yeah, nor do I want to, really. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And so, but, you know, she was a person that lifted me up, that, and I wasn't needing her in my life to make me whole or make me who I was. Like, I really had something that I could give her. We enjoyed spending the time together. And we would go out and deliver newspapers. I remember that's what we did early on, is we'd go out, and that's how we like really connected. We would go during the night and throw newspapers, and it was, it was work, but it was a place where we could connect, and that's really how I got to know her.
I love that.
Yeah.
So she understood what you were going through, your background, and was obviously supportive of you, doing your program and what you needed to do on your own as well.
Right.
Which I think sometimes people struggle with that in relationships if the other person doesn't really understand. So that's just so amazing that you had that and that she understood. And now here you are together still, and you have 3 boys.
Yes.
Wow. How old are they?
So I have an 11-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 3-year-old. 11,
10, and 3.
Yeah, the 11's almost 12. Next Friday, a week from today, it'll be 12 years old.
You guys are really busy. Wow, that's so amazing. More kids, or
no?
You guys are good.
We're good now.
So what is it like being a father to 3 sons in sobriety?
Such a gift. It really is. Yeah. I mean, it's what it's all about. At the end of the day, is giving into their lives and setting them up for success. And I vision myself when I'm however many years old, God willing, and I look back and feel like I did, like that was the one thing that I did, is raise successful boys that are giving to the world and doing their thing. And so it's everything. It fills me up. Like, we'll go out and stuff. Like, I like to go out and do things, but when we go out together as a family, it lifts me up so much. It fills my cup. Like, if I didn't have that, I would really struggle.
Yeah, I understand that. I only have 1 son, but I can relate.
Yeah.
What have they taught you the most about yourself?
That's a good question. I think what they've taught me is that, I have a responsibility to really monitor my thoughts, because I feel like my thoughts control my actions, and my head can go a lot of different places, really quick. But I've become to be disciplined with that over the years, and I believe if I do that and then I instill that in them, because I don't know where that self-confidence issue came from. I'm sure it was tied into my drug use, but I don't want that for them. If it's hereditary, then if I can teach them early on about their thoughts and what success looks like for them and all of that, that I just feel like they have a better fighting chance. So I really try to do that as a discipline, so that I can show up as powerfully as possible for them.
I love that. What would you say that they would say is their favorite quality about their dad?
Oof, that's a good question. I think they say I'm funny. I don't act it in normal day-to-day, but I love cutting loose. And my oldest son is so funny. He is such lighthearted, and he makes us all laugh. But that's it. Yeah, just having fun. Yeah. What would you
do if one of your sons was struggling? What would or if someone out there that has children, if they're struggling, what would be your suggestions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would ask for help, because I have had family that has struggled, and I immediately, having worked in the industry for just short of 20 years, when that happened, I wanted to jump in as the expert and say, we got to do this, 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 and this. And truthfully, it takes, that person, like me as an individual, if my children were having issues, then I would need just as much support as they would need. And so I would 100% ask for help instead of trying to control it or anything like that. Of course, the fatherly instinct would jump in to do that to some degree, but there's such great help out there now. I mean, the Edge and the Forge and all of that, it just takes one phone call, really, to get the help and guidance that you need.
Absolutely. So you have a lot going on, and we'll get into that professionally, what you do, but how do you balance your recovery with your work life, with your family life? What does that look like for you?
It's a balancing act, really, So what that looks like for me is I attend meetings. I chose the 12-step pathway, although I believe there's multiple pathways to recovery. That's just what worked for me, and I've stuck with it. So I have meetings that I attend, and then my support group, and I just consider it my circle of people, and a lot of those are other men, because we help each other. I do have wonderful women in recovery in my life as well, but with men, it's we need a place to let our to show our emotions as well too. Not that we can't do that in any other setting, but there's a sanctity of trust that we have with each other, and I have this group that I've been with for a really, really long time, and actually we meet every Friday morning, and we have for years, and so it's just like an accountability group, really, more than anything. So there's that's my recovery side. My work is not my recovery. I learned that early on. More seeing people in recovery, early in recovery, that were working, that made it to recovery, and then relapsed.
Oh yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because that is the story of so many, right? And when I first started working in treatment, one of my professors told me that. He's like, do not make that your recovery. And I didn't really understand what he was talking about at the time, but I definitely saw it as the years went on, and it cannot be your recovery. Working in treatment is not your recovery.
Right.
It has to be separate. The burnout is so high, the relapse is so high.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and when you're in recovery, you are around trauma and crisis when you're working in recovery all day long. And I, to make it personal, would soak that up like a sponge. And then that has to go somewhere. And so that's one reason it can't be your recovery. The other reason is, like, you need that, your own recovery is your outlet for that, or it was for me. And then, doing things like exercise and sports and, going out and having fun, it's all really important. So I usually mix family with fun. I have my friends that we do fun things too, but I just basically work during the days, and then do my recovery either early in the morning or in the evening is when I hit meetings, and then have fun with family in between.
And it sounds like consistency is a big thing for you, especially over the years. I mean, you've been in recovery for 20 years, and you're still doing your meetings, you're still doing your group on Friday mornings. I think that's so important, and like you said, to have that strong foundation of men where you can be honest and open and vulnerable, because we need that space. We need that safe space, and to do it consistently, and to build those bonds and know that we can count on those people. Right. We need people around us that understand what we're going through. So I love all of that.
Thank you.
So professionally, how did you find your passion, your purpose, what you were good at? What did that look like?
It was a journey, for sure. I was offered a job at the treatment center in Riverside after I just volunteered for a little while. I remember my boss, became my boss, but he said, why don't you go out and get your Class B driver's license, and if you get it, maybe we can have you drive the clients around in the van. It was one of those 15-passenger vans. And so I did, and I brought it back to him, got the license, and the day I brought it, he said, okay, you're hired. And that was March 18th of 2003, I remember. Wow. And so that was I'd worked every job at a treatment center except a chef or a clinician. Okay. Even though I would cook some food, but just never really took that on. And I did have a desire to be a clinician, but quickly realized that it really wasn't for me. There was great clinicians that were around all the time, that if I surrounded myself with them, I just seemed to do well myself and do well at the treatment center. So I was like a technician essentially, and then went up to supervisor, and then manager, and then director. And so I worked at that particular treatment center for 7.5 years, and I actually lived there for a good portion of it. Wow. Because I was moving around in like sober living homes. There was one in downtown Riverside, and then I found one across the street from the treatment center, and it was a little more costly. I remember it was like $400 a month. I remember writing the check for $400 a month and just being like, this is everything I have, and just really concerned about it. But luckily the treatment center had some housing for staff on it. It was an old beat up trailer at the bottom of the hill, and that's where I lived. And I actually lived there up until Clarabelle and I got married. Wow. So the day we got married was the day I moved out of that trailer.
Wow, that's quite the story.
So, yeah.
You were very humble, that's for sure. And so you worked your way through the treatment industry and you landed where? So now, what is your passion? What do you do in the treatment world?
Sure. Well, after that, I'd be remiss of saying that I went to a place called Northbound Treatment Services. It's based here in Orange County. We had locations in St. Louis, Kirkwood, just outside of St. Louis, and then in Seattle, in the Lower Queen Anne area. And I loved working there, and I still do. I love that treatment center.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, they're great, have done really good things. And so I started working there in 2010 and left in 2020, but I became a partner in the business in 2016. And we had grown it to be in those different states and had a variety of different beds. And I started out in compliance, actually, because I had done some compliance at the other treatment center. Whenever the state came, they said, hey, you deal with that situation, or we got a couple of accreditations, and they're like, hey, can you lead this? And so I just learned a lot about the standards and the regulations, more by doing than anything. So there's not really a school for compliance per se. I mean, you could become an attorney and understand laws and all that, but for best practices and everything with behavioral health care and treatment, there's no real school. So just by learning and doing, I learned. And so when I put in an application to Northbound, which a friend introduced me to them, which was actually Paul Alexander, who ran the TEACH program that was a part of at Southern MIC when I was going to school and being in treatment. He's the one who opened that program, and then he was the main owner at that treatment center. So I reconnected with him, and so just worked my way up from Director of Quality and Compliance to Executive Director, and then eventually Chief Operating Officer. And had a great time, did wonderful, wonderful things over the years. And the one thing I will say, and this was just me, but I really felt the burden in a good way, I believe, because I believe it served me well for a long time, of having people's lives at stake in my hands. I really felt a responsibility for that. And that was good because everybody was safe. We had incidents, but we were always quick to respond, and we had really good systems and all that set up. And at the same time, it was a heavy burden for me, and I thought about work a lot, and that the whole burnout thing you talked about. I was on the phone way too long, way too often. And it came to a point where I had to figure out what that looked like, So eventually I did, and that was before I left. I just started taking care of myself better, and we had a heavy focus on organizational health, which I believe is just key for anybody working in the industry, because sometimes they say the mechanic's car runs the worst. And it can, I think of clinicians and people like that, or anybody who works in the industry. It's again that whole thing of really taking care of yourself. And so having a culture of organizational health helped us provide a container where people could have permission to take care of themselves, and that
so
was
needed.
Yeah. So. That was just good stuff. So the compliance, the organizational health, the operations. So essentially, when I parted ways, me and another partner left at the same time, and Paul stayed. But one partner went back out to the desert. His name is Mike Netherton, and he was at the Betty Ford Center for 30-some years, and he went back out there and he did some consulting. And then I said, well, I love this compliance stuff. I love operations. I love organizational health. So I was already doing a little bit of consulting, mainly with some strategic partners, but just decided to do that full time. So in 2020, I did that, and I still work part-time at some treatment centers to serve as their compliance officer, one in particular, and anyways, that's so that fulfills my higher purpose right now, which is basically to protect the vulnerable. So.
And it's so needed. It's a day and age of treatment centers, and there's just so much, especially Orange County.
Yeah.
A lot of you don't know that out there, but there's a lot of treatment centers in Orange County, and they seem to be popping up everywhere because the demand is high, and unfortunately, but we need people like you to be able to go in and make sure everything is done properly and that the clients are safe. And And so, yeah, thank you for doing that.
Of course.
Thank you for taking that on. And you do a lot of advocacy work too,
Yes.
right? So explain what that looks like for you.
Thank you. Yeah. So at the same time, 2016, I went on to the education board of the California Consortium of Addiction Programs and Professionals, which everybody calls CCAP. And it's a great group. They mainly do credentialing. So there's only 3 credentialing bodies in California for drug and alcohol counselors. Are you a drug and alcohol counselor? You are? Through CCAP?
CCAP,
Okay,
yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, well, I never became that, but I love people that do. It's wonderful. So I love counseling. I just do. It's a passion of mine. And so that's one of the things they do is they oversee the credentialing for drug and alcohol counselors. They also do advocacy, legislation, and then education. And so over the years, after being on the education board, I went to the board of directors, and I serve as a program member on the board of directors, and have done that, I believe, since 2018, give or take, and have ran for the board a couple of times. But the advocacy work that I do specifically is I oversee 2 organizations. One is called the Addiction Recovery Communities of California, and that website is calrecovery.org. And that organization helps other recovery community organizations throughout California. So we're considered the statewide RCO, which is what a recovery community organization is. And a recovery community, RCO rather, is not a treatment center. It's more, it could be anything. It could be a church. It could be a, it's just some type of group. There's a lot of harm reduction that happens in recovery community organizations. They're the ones that are going out and passing out Narcan, doing trainings, and all of that. So there's not too many of them in California. I think the default is to be a treatment center over a recovery community organization, but we're trying to really push and give people permission to be RCOs, and our RCC is called a recovery a community center, which just basically means that it has a brick and mortar to it as well. And so we support them. We also have the recovery resident certification. So we'll go out to a sober living home and certify it under the National Alliance of Recovery Resident Standards. And it's voluntary. People don't have to do it, but the ones that do, the sober livings that do, we believe hold themselves to a higher standard and all of that. And then the last thing we do is peer support training. Or peer recovery support training, which is great for treatment centers like the technicians. I mean, their staff, but then sometimes there's volunteer opportunities where that peer support, provides something that a clinician can't provide and an administrator can't provide. And you see it all the time in treatment centers where peers are helping peers. But there's actually a certification for that now, so we do that training.
I love it. So how can people get involved if they want to volunteer, if they want more information?
Sure.
Where do they go? Who do they contact? What does that look like?
Yeah, through calrecovery.org, and you just make an inquiry.
calrecovery.org. Okay.
Yeah, that's the Addiction Recovery Communities of California, and I'm the chair of the organization. The organization is really a committee of CCAP. And so we have, I want to say, 10 to 12 RCOs that are with us right now, and anybody can go out and start an RCO, and we would highly recommend it. And there's a lot of grants and funding out there for that right now, especially in the current administration federally has provided, and it's come down to the states, a lot of grants and a lot of funding. So, and a lot of the RCOs get involved with advocacy and legislation, which is the other group that I run. It's called the California Coalition of Addiction Recovery Advocates, or otherwise known as CICARA. And that website is CICARA, or CCARA.info.
Okay.
And that is a group of other advocacy groups that have come together to say we have like-minded beliefs, and we want to be one voice of recovery as opposed to separate voices of recovery. So we have, I don't know, the gym Phoenix, the Phoenix, we have Faces and Voices of Recovery, Young People's Recovery, and all that. Just a good, I think there's about 20 advocacy groups. So we get together, and essentially when legislation comes across the table, or people, in places of power, even these local cities, that are trying to make discriminatory ordinances. We go in and we'll talk to them, we'll draft letters, and especially with legislation, when we put together a letter that's backed by 20 organizations as opposed to just one, it looks so much better, and it has that much more of a voice. So we really say nothing for us without us, and so we just try to get in front of the stuff out there, because there's a lot of bad bills that come across. The last time we were talking, So.
What are some of the most positive things that you've been able to have passed, or that you guys have been able to overcome? I always like thinking about the positive stuff, doing this work.
Yeah. So just recently, in fact, the day we were together last, that day the governor had signed a bill that it makes the state-ran universities and colleges have naloxone on campus. And so they have these overdose kits that are now required to go into the campuses, and then their staff, volunteer, whatever, all have to be trained on overdose and the use of Narcan, signs and symptoms of overdose and the use of it. And that's great.
It's huge.
And we had tried last year for that, and it got knocked down, and we were like, why?
Yeah, why?
So it didn't really make sense. It was a no-brainer, and I forget which legislator picked it up, but they did, and it went through no problem. And now we're looking to expand it into high schools and even local businesses.
I can't believe it's not in high schools.
Seriously.
I mean, my son's 14, and I'm going, someone just overdosed at one of the schools. I'm going, how is it not in high schools? It should just be readily available everywhere. Like, why not?
One of these universities, somebody came in and spoke, and they said, look, we've had these AED machines, defibrillator, all over the campus. We're all trained in how to use them. We check them regularly to make sure the pads aren't expired, and if there was an emergency, we'd grab it and we'd use it. But we haven't used it in 3 years. However, we've had 3 overdoses on campus.
Right.
And there's no training, this overdose reversal medication works, and it works really well. So that's one. The other one is the decriminalization of fentanyl test strips, which we understand why they were criminalized in the past, but the logic really didn't make sense. And they were available, but they were actually illegal to have. Luckily, I don't think anybody was really enforcing it, but now they're readily available. So if somebody is going to use drugs, they can actually take this test strip, say it's a pill, whatnot, and it has clear instructions. In fact, you can take your cell phone on the test strip and shine it on the QR code, and then it tells you exactly what to do. So if there's a pill, it can be broken up, and then it's added a little water. Test strip goes in, and it'll tell you if it has the presence of fentanyl in it. So I'm not an advocate of anybody using drugs.
Right.
However, it happens.
Yeah.
People do it, and now they have at least a tool to know if they're going to be exposed to fentanyl, which is killing off so many people right now.
Yeah, it's devastating. Where can people get those fentanyl strips?
Yeah, that's a great question. If anyone goes to that Circa website, any one of those groups and all of their contact information are on there, they can provide those fentanyl test strips.
Perfect. And Narcan all the information they need on that.
And there's a newer Narcan too, and I'm remiss of the name of it, but it's 1 dose as opposed to 2 doses.
Okay.
So it's just you have to store less of it, and then you use less. It's a more powerful dosage. And it works just as effective. You just don't have to carry 2 with you or have to use 2.
Okay.
So and then if you go to the CCAP website, you can actually purchase overdose kits from there. But a lot of places are giving it out for free.
Okay.
So if you go to any one of those advocacy groups, they'll be able to provide you with some.
Okay, perfect. And if someone wants to become a counselor or more information on what they need to do, where would they go? To the CCAP website.
Okay. So that's ccapp.us.
Okay.
Yep. And there's a career ladder for counselors, and it usually starts with registration. There's a lot of registrants throughout California, and a registrant can choose not to become a counselor as well too. They could even do that to try it out and see if it's for them. It's not a responsibility that's for the faint of heart, in my opinion. Counseling is a sacred duty and a sacred role, and but if it's your calling, we need counselors throughout the state. We're really facing a workforce shortage. And so I would really encourage people, if it's your calling, to even try it out and see. And if you're working with a good treatment center, they're not just going to throw you to the wolves and say, hey, go counsel people with zero supervision. They'll provide you good supervision and training, and then you have to do some school. And in order to do the school, it usually does cost money, but there are some grants and stuff out there. But then you can certify. There's multiple levels of certification, and now there's a license as well too. And I'll just say this: we've been fighting for a counselor licensure bill for the last 10 years, and I mean even before I've been on the board. And we would love to have that sit at the state level. Because my lovely wife is an esthetician. She doesn't work, but she could, because she's licensed to cut hair and do some of the dermatology stuff, and she's licensed for that, and she has a state license. But our drug and alcohol counselors don't. They have a government, a non-governmental certification, which is what CCAP provides for them, which is fine. But we really truly believe that it needs to be a license that sits with the state.
I agree.
So we've been pushing for that for years, and we'll get it through one of these days. But so there is a license called a LADAC. We just hope one day that'll be a government-based license.
Yeah. Okay. If anyone wants to get a hold of you, ask you any questions, talk to you, how can they reach you?
Through email is best. Yeah.
Okay.
It's Devon, Devon at circabehavioral.com, and it's CIRCA, Circa Behavioral. Yeah. So.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for all that you do. It makes such a difference. We really do have a voice if we use it, and we work together and we can make these changes. But unless we get out there and do our part and be of service and try to make that difference, it's not going to happen. So we all need to get out there and do our part. So thank you for doing your part and helping so many people.
Thank you for having me.
And happy 20 years.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
I'm blown away too. I don't know how it happened so quick.
I can't wait to get there one day, but I'm not overconfident. So one day at a time. All right, you guys, thanks for tuning in today. We'll see you next Friday. Bye.